Hi everyone, welcome back to St. Croix Church. This is the 8th in the series on James, and it's chapter 4, verses 1 to 10. I think it's very well done in the NRSV and also in the Message, although I personally want to think about them in a slightly different way than is portrayed by either of those translations, but I'm going to read it in the NRSV and then just share some of the thoughts that I have from the passage. Here we go. Those conflicts and disputes among you, where do they come from? Do they not come from your cravings that are at war within you? You want something and you don't have it, so you commit murder. You covet something, you can't obtain it, so you engage in disputes and conflicts. You don't have because you don't ask. You ask and don't receive because you ask wrongly, in order to spend what you get on your pleasures. Adulterers, don't you know that friendship with the world is enmity with God? Therefore, whoever wishes to be a friend of the world becomes an enemy of God. Or do you suppose that it's for nothing that the scripture says, God yearns jealously for the Spirit that he's made to dwell in us? But he gives all the more grace. Therefore it says, God opposes the proud, but gives grace to the humble. Submit yourselves therefore to God. Resist the devil, he'll flee from you. Draw near to God, he'll draw near to you. Cleanse your hands, you sinners. Purify your hearts, you double-minded. Lament and mourn and weep. Let your laughter be turned into mourning, your joy into dejection. Humble yourselves before the Lord, and he will exalt you. So here's how I want to look at it. In line with the way that I've been treating this entire book, and probably influenced by Marcus Borg's teaching, that Jesus longed to build a community that was full of social equality. Something unheard of then and really something unheard of now. A community where everyone belonged or could, and where everyone could be accepted as they were, but invited to a better and richer life. And that in the midst of it all, the Spirit would dwell, and God's presence would be rich, and wonderful things might happen. It'd be a sense of life that was bigger and better than normal life. And it hadn't been seen in the Greek culture, it hadn't been seen in the Jewish culture. And here is the desire, the early Christian church in Jerusalem that James is writing to is trying to live it out, but they are struggling. It's not an easy thing to pull off. And so I think my tendency over the years has been to read this passage as an individual, and as an individual, it always feels like a chastisement. It feels like I'm being encouraged towards guilt because I'm loving the world or the things in the world, and I'm just not a holy enough person. But what if it has nothing to do with that? What if instead it's all about whether or not we can build the community together, and loving the world or the ways of the world is going back to the normal ways of doing things, and and humbling yourself before God would be to not insist on your own way, but to yield your heart towards others, and to work towards the kind of unity that allows God's Spirit to be residing in a group of people. So anyway, that's how I want to look at it. So I'll just go through my list of thoughts. If you read this passage as an individual, it can push you toward rejection of the world, whatever that is. And you can be immersed in guilt every time it seems as though you're valuing something that's beautiful that somebody has made. And it can also make you feel that your natural appetites are evil, worldly. Your only hope is to throw yourself into God, and perhaps mercifully, if he thinks you're doing okay, he'll grant your desires. I think this is how I read that passage in the past. It doesn't make sense, though, with the statement that you'd find in John's Gospel, which is that God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son. God apparently loves the world, but we're not to. So I've just been thinking, maybe we screwed it up. Maybe we've got it wrong. If the letter is full of instructions to a community, then loving the world might be something completely different than loving something beautiful that's been made. What if the author is not so concerned about your rejection of the world, but your rejection of God's desire to build a community where people really do care for each other. It's almost like the author is contrasting God's plan with our own tendency towards unbalanced selfishness and personal ambition, or insisting on having our own way, or insisting on our own belief system at the expense of others. Some of these things aren't bad. I think ambition and selfishness in some ways are very healthy. But I think that in this case, it's talking about the kind of force that drives us away, where we tear the social fabric. The words that are used for desire in this passage are interesting. One word that's used twice is the word hedone. It's the word that we get hedonism from, and it's in ancient Greek literature. It's not a natural pleasure. It's pleasure that tends towards an unhealthy place. And the other word for desire in this passage is exactly the same. It's the word epithumia in Greek, and the normal word for a desire is thumis. But epi is a prefix. Epithumia. Epi means upon or on top of. So it's like taking a natural desire and then adding it. It's a desire gone crazy. So I think that the way that the New Testament thinks about our desires is that they're healthy and good, but that they can be supercharged and can go to a bad place. So an epithumia is like a passion that's driven way past a healthy place. And so it seems as though if we follow these things, especially the tendency towards selfishness to insist on our own way, that what we do is we break community. So if I'm right that this is an appropriate way to read this letter, probably from a pastor to a group of people who are fighting and quarreling, chasing after unhealthy desires isn't so much about being drawn to things that are worldly or not religious. It's about people who insist on their own way, even when it has the capacity to destroy the community. And maybe a simple way to paraphrase friendship with the world, then, would be the kind of independence that reverts back to the world's way of doing things, seeing people according to some kind of class structure. Those who think as I do are worth more than others. Jesus gave us a better vision than this. It's not the normal way of life in the world, and we have to fight to keep it rather than fight with each other in order to gain our own way. On the positive side, the last few verses, I'll read them once more, and then I'll tell you what I think they might mean in light of what I've been saying about this passage. On the positive side, the last verses could be seen in this way. Submit yourselves, therefore, to God. Resist the devil, and he will flee from you. Draw near to God, and he'll draw near to you. Cleanse your hands, you sinners. Purify your hearts, you double-minded. Lament, mourn, and weep. Let your laughter be turned into mourning, your joy into dejection. Humble yourselves before the Lord, and he will exalt you. Submit yourselves to God, in the way that I'm thinking of it, would be to yield toward each other in humility. Resist the devil would be to fight against the desire to tear away from others. Draw near to God, and he will draw near to you, would be to let God's Spirit richly heal all of our hearts. And humble yourself before the Lord is not about prayer, although I think it's a healthy thing to do, but humble yourself before the Lord is more about, it's more a summary statement. Build the community instead of your own personal, unbalanced desires and ambitions, and God will fill it with his Spirit, with his joy, and a joy that you can feel, a joy that's real. And others who can do this along with you will be lifted up. You'll all be deeply appreciated. You'll be building something together that is full of a precious quality of life. So that's the thinking for this week. Trying to take this passage and look at it in light of a community message instead of an individual reproof. Okay, take care. Bye now.